our scene. We've done the volumetric lighting. We can look at through here and see what we've got. It's looking pretty good. If you want to turn off these, you can turn off all of the guides, and that will make it a little bit easier to look at. So final thing that we need to kind of look at is we need to go to the rendering attributes. So first off, turn on ambient occlusion. It will make a difference. You don't really see it at the moment, but it will. Turn bloom on. You can see that it just kind of gives a bit more richness to the lighting, and everything else should be okay. Turn on this, and I would recommend motion blur. Motion blur will kill your renders, but it is worth doing. The final thing is to click on your camera. So your camera is lurking around in here somewhere. In your camera, and in your camera settings, I like to turn on depth of field. You don't have to, and I am going to make the icing the focal point, and it just means that when you go through your scene, we go through here and we go through it, bits will be blurred out and the stuff in the foreground will not. Okay, the scene looks really nice, and Eevee will render it. Eevee will do a decent job. I'll show you the difference very briefly. If we turn on cycles, cycles will do all of the volumetrics as well. Yeah, I'm still waiting here. So it's updating, and how many? Well, 128, which is pretty high, and we haven't done denoising yet. And yeah, well, I'm going to be talking for a while because this is going to take its time. But the difference between Eevee and cycles is that cycles will look amazing. Like, it will look lovely, 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 but it will take a long time to render. And the thing is that for big scenes like this, it will look great for stills, and so I'll render out a still of this and it will look epic, it will look really nice, but it's still going to take some time. So whereas we turn it to Eevee, boom, it's rendered. So that's pretty quick, and that's kind of what all we really need to worry about. Before rendering, I would turn your samples up a little bit. Just turn them to like 100 or something. It will you'll kind of notice it, not a massive amount, but it's worth doing. And then and then this little tab here is your rendering tab, and this is where we're kind of going to set off our final render. We want it to be 100%, want it to be 1920 by 1080. All of this stuff is normal. Frame beginning, frame end. Frame rate, we're going to, 25 frames a second is fine. And then don't put this on. And then here it's going to ask you what you want it to render as. Eevee is good enough to do video and to do it relatively reliably, but to be honest, I've had a few crashes and I wouldn't bother. Then set your wherever your render file is. So I'm going to go to desktop. I'm going to create a new file folder, and I'll call this render 1. Click on there, accept, then it will update the file path. Make sure it's RGBA, make sure it's PNG, and keep all of this stuff the same, and that's good. And then once you're ready to go, you press render and render animation, and then you'll get something that looks pretty good. What you can do later on is you can set up a second camera, or you can set up a second scene. It doesn't really matter how you do this. And then in this camera, you can go to here and cue, select object and frame selected if I can find where that is, which I seem to be having some kind of mad moment. So you can, and then you can basically kind of build your own scene, and then do a second close-up on the donut, so that you can kind of create like a hero kind of scene, and you can zoom in there as close as you want and do. You have to adjust the lighting. The lighting will look a little bit ropey, because yeah, it just will. And you can see here I've gone in super close, which is, I'm not sure. So you might want to do like a scene like this, and remember that before you render, just to let you know that ambient occlusion is quite important, and at the moment, if you put it up or down, that will change the way that it works with the scene. You also need to kind of like play around with it to kind of get these to give proper shadows, because at the moment they're not really. And that's all to do with kind of rendering performance and all that kind of stuff. And that's really it. I hope some of you do have a go at this. I mean, it is really hard. It's quite challenging. There's a lot of work to do within it in order to get it making it work, but you will end up with a final scene at the end of it. And if you don't worry. I hope you learned a lot from Blender, and we will be doing more in year 11. So that's it.